will have that opportunity. Okay, so we're talking about conscious, healthy aging. And as a fellow osteomate, I'm going to gear this for us.
They sent a picture of him. He's tall and thin now.
Osteomates. So Warren, can you mute individuals' phones there? Okay, so as having an ostomy for the past 8 years, I've learned a few things, and and considering too, we're not just osteomates. We're people that are aging. That if we can stay healthy as we age, it's going to help us deal with what we need to deal with having an ostomy. So I appreciate this time very much with you. So my why is when I look around at all of us and I look around at my friends, we're all aging. So we want to see what it takes to, again, stay well as we age. So we're going to talk about you and your aging, our health and longevity genomics, and let's make the most of our remaining time, whether it's in this remaining time that we have in this session or remaining time in our lives. So you and your aging. Getting old. Now, these are something that you may have thought about. Getting old is something I don't really want to think about. Can you relate to that? And then is it a matter of I just want to look good as I get older? Or is old age to me, is it something, a decrepit picture in my mind? Just see here. So reframing aging, the word actually aging comes from an ancient translation that I was really struck by, that I found, is that it relates to vital force. So you think about as we age, we should have a greater experience. We may not be able to be so much physically having you can say energy with us, but we can say there's a certain vital force we feel within ourselves. You can say maybe relating to our sense of purpose here in life and what we have to offer to others. So if you want to look and feel good, you must do something about it. You have to change your picture accordingly. So what does it take to do that? First, we want to see, okay, where are you at with your health and aging? So on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you say? So in the chat, what would you, if you know how to use your chat, actually, what number would you say? Or you can just unmute your mic and count and say your number if you want to. Okay. And then what would you like to see and experience relative to your health and aging? So wherever you're at with your aging, maybe you have, like Warren has, a shoulder pain. As we get older, we might have more pains like that. So what does it take? Think about, like, what do you want to experience as you get older? So anybody want to make a comment with that? You can unmute your mic if you'd like to do that. Warren, any comments?
Other I actually, on the scale of 1 to 10, I put an 8, but again, compared to other people, I am absolutely thankful for the health I have. And I want to be clear, my shoulder pain is from an accident, had nothing to do with being old. Now, having said that, it takes longer for injuries to heal, to get better, but what the hell.
Very good, Warren. Very good. And Warren, Walter, I see 7. That's excellent for you. And David, 5. Okay, so those are some good numbers.
I'm about a 6, and vitality is what I'd like to have.
Okay, very good. We're going to talk more about that, Ronald. Okay, so I'm going to close my chat here. We'll move on. Okay, so raising our understanding of our health and qualitative longevity. So, when people think about getting older, some people have the thought, well, I don't want to get old because I don't want to feel bad. We want to think about our qualitative longevity. So feeling good as we do get older. So let's look at what it takes in that respect. So number 1 is the bullseye is lifestyle choices. Now, these are things we already know, but it's good to reaffirm them. So we're in the center. You can say center of the choices we make. And those choices can relate to our posture. Now, one thing I remember when Bobby and Jane Walker, and we're going to talk about a little bit more, they would say, when you put your pouch on, you upright yourself, put yourself in an upright position. And when we do that, it kind of gives us a greater sense of confidence. And if we're in a supine position, right, instead of prone, we can stretch your body out maybe in that respect. We want to think about breathing, lifestyle choices, breathing, eating and drinking healthily, fitness, rest, activity, balance. And we want to circle around and say in terms of posture. Our posture really relates to our attitude and how we think and feel about things. So if we're ever feeling like we're getting a little dejected, just remember to upright ourselves. I personally do a posture exercise every morning where I stand against the wall, put my head against the wall, my hips, and I hold that position for about 4 minutes. And it helps to give a sense of, you can say, internal vitality. Breathing, now breathing also relates to how we handle stress. So a little exercise we can do is if we can upright ourselves, and you can say breathing in slow. So if we want to do this together, breathe in slow as we sit up straight, and then breathe out slower. Breathing in slow and breathe out slower.
Steve, can I ask you something about that?
Sure.
Two things, actually. One is when I've had my stress test in the past, I have the guy who has administered it had made a point of telling me, what was it? Oh, smell the smell the roses, breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your mouth, I think was what he was making a point of saying during the stress test, especially. But was there something about, and I saved it from years ago, about a breathing technique about breathing in for 4 seconds,
yes,
holding it, or is it 4?
Well, they have a 4 square breathing. They have various techniques like that, but for simplicity's sake, for right now, if you breathe in slow and then breathe out slower than you're breathing in, that activates what's called your parasympathetic nervous system. So a real simple exercise is when you get stressed, upright yourself posture-wise, breathe in slow and breathe out slower. Okay, that's a simple little thing you can do. And how we address stress, really is our highest leverage for our health. And if we can continue to see how we can refine in that respect, it's going to help with the quality of our health, and you can say the length of the qualitative longevity that we have. Okay, now eating and drinking. So things to remember is eating real food. Real food, that means less processed foods, less boxed up foods, and then adequate clean hydration. Now, with osteomates here, we want to stay hydrated. I've had to go to the hospital a couple of times to be getting dehydrated. So we've been emphasizing that during our sessions from short times, is staying hydrated. So clean hydration. I recommend folks get a reverse osmosis water filter because it takes heavy metals out of our drinking water. And there's a certain amount that's allowed in our drinking water, but we want to get them all out. Okay, stop eating when 80% full. Now, Warren does intermittent fasting. And so he stops eating at a certain time, but also we want to see about eating when we're not overeating, because that can help also with helping our bodies stay healthy as we live. Okay, fitness. We want to think about aerobic resistance training, stretching to see what works for us. Now, with being prone to having hernias, we may not want to lift weights, but we may want to use, say, elastic tubing, which we have a little bit more control with, which provide some resistance training. And then simply movement, walking, dancing. I know Warren's a good dancer, right, Warren?
Absolutely not. I'm sorry.
Okay, but whatever it takes for gardening, etc., whatever it takes for movement, we want to get our lymph moving to keep the blood moving healthily through our system. And then I talk about the flow state. Now, finding the balance between rest and activity, where there's talk about a flow state, and there's been lots written about that. You can just Google that, but finding a flow state is basically finding that sweet spot of not overamping yourself and not underamping yourself, but finding that flow place where you feel like you're doing enough, you're not overdoing enough, but you're doing something in your life that's you feel like you're staying in a flow with. Is that making sense to you all? Okay, so natural support. Now, lifestyle is the bullseye. Now I'm going to get into a little bit. Yes.
Could I ask you something about that eating 80% full? I found out if you have a big glass of water as you're having your meal, that helps a lot in maintaining that.
Ronald, whatever it takes. Now, some people believe not to drink a lot while you eat there, but maybe before you eat, have that large glass of water and then wait a couple minutes before you do eat. Because if you're drinking a lot while you're eating, it's been said it dilutes your digestive enzyme juices. Okay, natural support. Now, again, lifestyle is the bullseye. Now I'm going to get into some things that I get into recommending for folks. So looking at things like supplementation. And we've been talking about last session about minerals and vitamins there, antioxidants, digestive support. Now, a big thing, again, these are areas that I recommend folks look to cover the bases with, having enough minerals and vitamins, antioxidants, digestion. Now, vitamin D actually has something to do with our intestine. It actually helps our intestinal villi, our small intestines, stay integrated to allow for, you can say, the proper barrier so things don't get into our bloodstream. So vitamin D is important, as well as a lot of other things too. Okay, essential fatty acids. Now, essential fatty acids are like fish oils. Okay, so there's omega supplements there that act as anti-inflammatories. Now, a lot of us who've had intestinal concerns, and the reason why we may have an ostomy is because of inflammation in our system. We want to see what can be done to help keep that at bay, and omegas help with that. Now, a lot of folks don't know this in terms of supplementation, that, you know, our body goes through certain, say, detoxification mechanisms there, and taking a drainage remedy actually helps with that. So there's things like enzymes that people take on an empty stomach that help clean up our system as we sleep, something called bromelain, or this homeopathic drainage formulas or botanicals. Okay, you guys, any questions about that? I know that might be a new concept to you. Otherwise, I can move on. Okay. And again, the reason for drainage is to help clean our lymphatic system. Okay, now microcurrent. Now, microcurrent is a form of electrical therapy.
Steve, I'm sorry, I was having trouble.
Sure, Alan.
Back to your last one.
Yes.
And I guess I was all the way back to omegas. There was a point, because I went through some chemo and some other things, I was told to get off of all of those things.
Yes, right, Alan. Yes.
Now, that was a year and a half ago, more than that. I mean, I haven't really gotten, like something like fish oil, I used to take religiously. Should I be moving back toward that?
Absolutely, Alan. Just during chemo, they recommend not to take, you know, certain supplements. No. So yeah, for sure, I'd say get back on it.
Okay.
Okay. Now the next step here, again, microcurrent. Now, microcurrent is a form of electrical therapy that matches your body's own electrical nature. Now, some people use TENS units, but that uses a larger electrical current, which is kind of foreign to the body. It may help with pain, but it doesn't help with healing, where the microcurrent does. So it helps with pain assistance. So Warren, this is something you can get to use there. So I can talk to you more about that. Okay, but also can be applied to your earlobes here, and for ear clips, which can help to charge your brain, but also has a setting where when you feel a little anxious, it helps to relax your brain. So I find that very helpful. And then the body support. Now, there's also ways of applying microcurrent to acupuncture points, which can help with certain forms of feeling ill or sick with. Okay, now assessments to help determine what you need. Now, lifestyle is the bullseye. Supplements are helpful. Again, if you get things through your diet, it's helpful, but it is helpful to have supplements to help make up for things. So assessments to help determine what you need, looking at your blood. So again, with us having ostomies there, we want to look at inflammatory markers over time. So something called CRP and something called SED rate. Now, most doctors probably take your SED rate, but a lot of doctors may have not taken your C-reactive protein. And that's a good marker for inflammation. Now, remember when I had I had colon cancer, but I had severe joint pain with that. And my CRP, your CRP naturally should be, I think, from 0 to 3, but my CRP was 99. It was the highest doctor that I went to had ever seen, and my body was in severe pain. I couldn't work for a year and a half. So if you're feeling pain, now Warren, you may want to check your CRP, because if you're feeling, if the steroid shot didn't work, and personally I had steroid shots under X-ray, and they had no influence on the pain I was having until I started taking something called curcumin, which once I started taking that, it started lowering my CRP definitively and getting down to a tolerable level where I was able to get out and actually take a trip to New Jersey to visit my family. So it's an important marker to keep an eye on, especially if steroid shots aren't working. Okay, CA markers. Now, for some of us who've had cancer and tissue breakdown markers, these are something to keep an eye on. And usually the oncologist will only take CEA, but you want to take other markers like CA 19-9, CA 125. There's other cancer markers to see if things are actually escalating to other parts of your body, which also relate to these markers, what's called creatine kinase, and LDH. These are tissue breakdown markers. And if those start to elevate, then it's something to watch your cancer markers, but also to see what it takes to get those down to prevent pathologies from developing. Okay, estrogen, now a big part of cancer 2 markers. If your estrogen levels increase, that can set the stage for cancer. So estrogen levels can increase from things like plastics, from pesticides, from herbicides, from toxins in the environment. And if we're being exposed and our body's vulnerable, that can raise our estrogen level, which is a flag for cancer development in our body. Cleveland heart markers. Now, Warren, your friend having the heart attack. Now, this marker here is called MPO, the MPO marker of Cleveland heart panel inflammation. That's a marker to tell if you're vulnerable to a stroke or a heart attack. So that's a good marker I check for people for, but for your doctor, you may want to ask your doctor to check that periodically to see where that's trending. And you want to make sure if that's high, you want to see what it takes to get it lower, because that sets the stage also, again, for a stroke or a heart attack. Okay, other things you want to look at is your vitamin D levels, your iron levels. Now, those of us with blood, you can say blood in our pouches, right? We want to check to see if that's affecting our iron levels. And if we get lightheaded, there's a good chance, and we have blood in our pouch, which I just had this past week, which I was getting lightheaded. So I've had a challenge this past week, and I'm pretty sure my ferritin levels are low. So it's something you want to keep an eye on. Hemoglobin A1C is your blood sugar levels, and then thyroid over time, and then thyroid antibodies to see if you actually have some kind of autoimmune happening in your body. So that's an important thing, especially again with us with ostomies. Most of us probably have autoimmune conditions. Heavy metals. Now, heavy metals, some of you may know, but heavy metals are in our environment. They're in our water, they're in our air, they're in our food, and they can interfere with our body's own metabolic functions. So there's ways of checking to see if those levels are increasing through our hair or through our urine. Microbiome testing, we talked a little about this last session too. There's a test called FX Biome, which checks our microbiome of our, say, the bacteria of our intestine. Now, I just did test myself, and as an ileostomy, the people who run this test looked at my results, and they've basically never seen the results that I had. That's why I like having a little study in terms of all of us who've had ileostomies to see what kind of bacterial counts we have, and to see how we can address them over time may help all of us in time. And now lifestyle genetic testing, the DNA company. Now, the next part of this testing presentation I'm going to go into is looking at our genetics. So overall, we see the bigger picture. Our genes, your genes and your environment are together responsible for every aspect of your health or disease. Now, you may have attributed to that, but actually let's bring this a little bit more conscious. And we're talking about being consciously healthy as we age. So being conscious of these factors, the environment. Basically, our genes are our genes. They don't change, but the environment surrounding our genes can change. And that relates to our lifestyle factors. That's part of our environment around our genes. And there's something called epigenetics, which sets the stage where the genes are turned on or turned off. And you want the good genes turned on, you want the bad genes turned off. And our lifestyle factors relate to that. So let's look at that a little bit more. Okay, health and longevity genomics. So there's genes that relate to our mood and behavior, how we think and feel about things. There's genes that relate to our heart, our cardiovascular system, our immunity and detoxification mechanisms, our hormones and exercise, our sleep, our diet, and there's actually 22 genes that relate to our longevity. So let's look at this in terms of mood and behavior genomic relationships. Now, to me, this is the most important, because if we can be more conscious of our genetic tendencies mood-wise, it helps put us in more of a position to handle the things that come up that may have got us spun out over the years, and which may have related to why we have ostomies. Now, personally speaking, it's my inability to handle stresses way back when that caused severe intestinal reactions and severe diarrhea problems, gut problems, something I couldn't get a handle on that eventually escalated into colorectal cancer. So that's why I'm emphasizing this pretty strongly, to see what it takes. So let's look at these relationships. So for one, addiction. Addiction come in two types: binge addiction and risk reward based. Depression. Depression is a complex mood disorder. Your genes play in determining your likelihood of having symptoms of depression. Anxiety. Your genes can influence the severity and likelihood of anxiety symptoms. Burnout. Millions of people suffer from burnout. Your genes can tell us how likely you are to experience burnout. ADHD. Many people are misdiagnosed with ADHD every year. Your genes influence your ability to stay focused and engaged in tasks. Mood and continued. Procrastination, or you're a person who avoids tasks because of anxiety or because you're not interested in doing it. Motivation, what's the best way to keep yourself motivated? Your genes can influence how you likely are to become motivated, and how to stay motivated when the going gets tough. Irritation and frustration, do you find yourself getting easily frustrated or irritated? You're not alone, and your genes likely have something to say about it. Thinking patterns and neurotic tendencies. Did you ever feel like you're stuck in a hamster wheel going in circles over and over? Personalized recommendations based on your genomic profile can improve your ability to address your specific mood tendencies. Now, let's bring this to us. Let's ground this with us. So Bobby Brewer and Jane Walker. Some of us had the privilege of having them as our mentors in this ostomy group before Warren took over, before Maureen. Maureen was an ostomy mate, and she's the one who introduced me, and sadly she passed away, but she recommended that I go to the ostomy meetings there, and it was Bobby Brewer and Jane Walker who was leading them at the time. And I don't know if any of you haven't known them, but if you have, you would know they never allowed us
Actually, did we lose you, Steve, or are you just being emotional?
I'm emotional right now. They never
Actually,
allowed
for what
us.
it's worth, to give you a
Yes.
chance, George is every bit as responsible as me for keeping things going these days. And just in case you weren't going to, in fact, Jane is on the right, and she passed away last year early at 93-ish. And Bobby on the left, I stay in touch with and take her for, she's battling cancer, and but she's got her head on straight for an 88-year-old woman.
And those two had this group monitored and took this and control. Anyway, they ran this group for about 60 years. That's 60.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right. The central factor that I acknowledge them for is they never allowed us to feel sorry for ourselves. They never allowed us to do that. They would point their finger at us. They would affirm the fact, let's get on with life, so strong. So I wanted to bring them to mind, especially when we're talking about mood genetics. Their mood genetics were imparted to us. So maybe we might have certain genetic tendencies for our mood, but we can have more of a choice when we recognize we're consciously dealing with something, but to remember folks who instilled a sense of confidence.
Well, and I
And-
sure agree with you on Bobby Brewer. And she was a wonderful dancer, by the way.
Actually,
You're wrong.
excuse me, if that's the case, in fact, earlier this week, I was at her place. I'm gonna see if she can teach me a little bit, even though she needs her walker to get around.
Right.
Mhm. Excellent, very good. Yeah, they covered every base, basically any question we had, they covered it pretty well, including sex. I remember Bobby making some good comments about that. Okay, so good to take a moment to acknowledge them, right, George, right, Warren?
Yep.
Yeah, whoever else
Amen.
has none, yes. Okay, so again, talking about mood, we want to think about our brain health genomics. So physiologically, mental and emotional aspects of brain health are influenced by our genes. Now there's something called our BDNF gene, which relates to our brain health, our food tendencies, our mood tendencies. So that gene controls levels, relates to levels that relate to what's called BDN, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So if those levels go low, you'll be there's more of a tendency or vulnerability to feel depressed or feel like you're going to get into those aberrant patterns, like say addictive patterns with eating, for example. Insulin resistance. So again, these are brain health relationships with genetics. Insulin resistance, blood sugar balance. So, we know our genes relate to that, but our blood sugar drops, that's going to cause us to feel, say, a little more anxious. And then stress resilience. There's genes that relate to our stress resilience. And then there's ways of helping with these genes if we have certain vulnerabilities. But we also want to look at longevity in our bone health. So normal bone, osteoporosis. In some people, bone health deteriorates at a faster rate than normal. Genetics plays an important role in overall bone health and longevity. Your vitamin D genes control your body's relationship with vitamin D, and which is the most important compound related to bone health alongside vitamin K2. So some people take vitamin D, but you got to remember, if you take vitamin D, you should take it with K2, or at least take vitamin D with a vegetable-containing meal, with a fat-containing meal too, which helps that vitamin D to be absorbed better, even if you have genomic vulnerabilities with not being able to absorb it. Okay, genomics. Now talking about, this is biodefense genomics. So with COVID, we've had a concern about our vulnerabilities to viruses, but biodefense is your body's ability to protect itself from infections, but along with inflammation and aging in general. Biodefense is your body's balance between inflammation and detoxification. Ideally, there is a minimal presence of long-term inflammation with quick and agile detoxification processes. So, when our body gets inflamed, if our body's vulnerable or not able to detoxify, that inflammation keeps building. So in my genetic background, having it checked, my detoxification processes are compromised. And so that's part of the reason I can see why my inflammation levels went so high. And not until I started taking something to help address that it was helped to be addressed. And now since I've realized I'm compromised detoxification-wise, I'm supporting those processes better now too. So detoxification serves to minimize and clean up inflammation. So like what I just said, if we have inflammation, we want the proper detoxification process engaged so it cleans up inflammation. Several genes and gene pathways influence these cellular processes, which includes methylation. Now, I don't know if you've heard the term methylation. Methylation relates, it's basically a metabolic process. And if it's poorly happening in your body, it can contribute to joint pain, to gut disorders such as Crohn's disease or IBS, as well as heart disease, stroke, cancer, senile dementia, aging, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So you want to see what it takes to help with those methylation processes. And last session, Bill, you were bringing up about B9. So inflammation and detoxification relates to methylation as well as other processes too. But we talked about last session about addressing B12 and B9. B9 is folate. So talking about vitamin B12. Now, there's something called genotypes. So checking your genome can check to see if you have a genotype, which is called AA. We won't get too scientific into that, but if it is, then you want to take methylated cobalamin. Okay, methylated. So you'll see on your bottle, if it's B12, you'll see if it's methylated, or you might see it's adenosylcobalamin if otherwise. So if your genotype is not AA, then you would take this type of B12, which would optimize your functioning. Okay, then you want to evaluate your dosage based on your B12 levels. Okay, vitamin B9 folate. Now, folate's important. Let's see. Now, in terms of genetics, you take methylated folate if your genotype is GG. Otherwise, you take non-methylated folate as folic acid or folic acid otherwise. Now, a little story about me personally. Whenever I took a B complex vitamin, I would feel tired afterwards for some reason. And usually B complex is supposed to kick up your energy processes, but the type of folate that was in my B complex, the one that I was taking or exploring with, was actually methylated folate. So my genetics, basically, that's not optimal. And I would say that was the reason why I was feeling tired after taking the B complex. But once I started taking a B complex with folic acid, it's amazing how it's helped to sustain my energy levels. So that's a little clarification. I know, Bill, we were talking about that last session, so I wanted to bring that out today. Okay. Now, also folate deficiency appears to enhance carcinogenesis. So if you're deficient in folate, that can relate to, pathologies with cancer. Okay. So there's a whole lot written about that. You can Google that. I can help you further with that, but folate, these two vitamins are really important to help with that methylation process, which can help with inflammation and detoxification. Okay, now if this is striking you and you say, okay, how do I know what to take? Okay, specific functional genomic testing. And this testing, the goal is to evaluate the roles that your genes play in the efficiency of several important biological and cellular processes in your body. Learn how well your body is performing the tasks necessary to maintain optimal health and wellness. And where there's opportunity to make diet, lifestyle, and environmental changes that can set you up for the most optimal health outcomes. So there's testing related to that. So, if these things strike you, again, I'm not here to sell anything. I just want to inform you that there's testing. If you want to learn more about it, you can go to this link, basically bit.ly, bit.ly, My Conscious Health. And I entitled it My Conscious Health because as we become conscious of our genetic tendencies, it puts us better in position to optimize our health for the short and long term. So you go to that link, you can learn more about longevity testing, genomic testing. If you want to set up a time with me to talk more about one-to-one, I'd be glad to do that. You can email me at drsteve@mindspring.com. I think Warren has my email, or you can put your email in the chat.
Actually, I was going to tell you to put it in the chat just in case.
Right. Okay. Right now, I'm a little compromised right now with being able to do that with sharing my screen, but actually, I can do it afterward. I can do that, or Warren, you can do it.
Actually, no, I always tease people, if I had to make my living as a data entry person, I'd starve to death. I would trust you when you're finished.
Okay, got it. Okay, now, all in all, I love the idea of helping individuals stay well as they age. So I've started some group sessions in that respect. So my next group session is July 28th. You'll all be welcome to attend that. It's a Thursday night at 7:30. You can contact me for details, or going to put your email in the chat, or you can contact me later. Okay, so what do you think? Questions, comments? Oh, I'm going to close.
Steve, I think, for me personally, I think you've done a fine job of confusing me.